Thank you everyone for making time on relatively short notice. We appreciate your ability to do so. We understand these are unusual times for us all, and so we hope that you're safe and well. We are holding this webinar, as you would have seen in the email, to discuss possible funding opportunities. I want to start by letting you know that we only had our official word that this opportunity would arise as late as last night. And so there may be some questions that we can't answer directly in person right now, and we can follow up by email, and we intend to have a frequently asked questions capability to help answer those questions that we can't answer right now. The agenda for the webinar is to just begin with an overview of where things stand in terms of this opportunity, some of the qualifications around the opportunity to respond, some important notes, some detailed submission requirements, a submission process that we've established, some important dates, and then information about resources. The situation is that there's a federal funding opportunity available to support initiatives to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, including to support the development and advanced manufacturing of medical countermeasures and biomedical equipment and supplies. We're organizing our community on a highly accelerated timescale to consider ideas that we can implement rapidly and that will yield specific and tangible benefits to the national COVID-19 response after a 12-month period of performance. These project topics need to be well defined so that they can be launched in a much shorter time frame than other projects from our community that we have ongoing or have launched and completed in the past. Our expectations are that the PI for these ideas will be from a NIIMBL member organization, and that the organization must remain a member of NIIMBL throughout the completion of the project. We're expecting that rough order of magnitude budgets should be between $100,000 and $750,000 total costs for the project period of performance. We're expecting that all of the required submission information is submitted by the requested deadline in order for the idea to be considered. We are expecting that organizations will have the bandwidth and the resources needed to complete the project by June 2021 or sooner, and that's even factoring in suspension of activities at many organizations. And we expect projects with completion cycles by or before August 2020 so that we can demonstrate impact on a shorter time scale if possible. Important notes. This opportunity is going to be distinct from other projects that we've worked on within our community in the past. First, these projects are not limited to biopharmaceutical manufacturing. They can be associated with any technology or product space where our expertise is valuable. For example, this could involve PPE production, it could involve solid oral dosage forms, durable medical equipment, diagnostic tests, etc. I'll refer back to the criteria that the opportunity is to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, including to support development and advanced manufacturing of medical countermeasures and biomedical equipment and supplies that I referred to earlier. These projects do not require cost sharing of any type. Large companies may also submit ideas and suggestions with the expectation of receiving direct funding to support those activities. And the third bullet point here, these projects do not require partnerships or collaborations amongst organizations. Ideas that involve a single organization are invited. In terms of the submission itself, we're asking for a one-page Microsoft Word file with the following information below: project title, principal investigator, their institution and email address. If there are additional key personnel and team members, effectively co-PIs, we're interested to know who they are, their respective institutions and email addresses, a rough order of magnitude budget, that is the total cost of the project, the specific problem being addressed, and its relationship to other regional and national COVID-19 response efforts, the goals and objectives over the 12-month period of performance, and the outcome, a succinctly worded way to present the benefit to the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. All of the above on one page. Your Word file submission should be marked NIIMBL Confidential, either in the header, the footer, or by watermark. And the file should be named with the PI last name, first initial, and if you're the PI and you're submitting multiple submissions, just append a number to the file name. So some examples: Carbonell R1.docx, Carbonell R2.docx, Robert C.doc, etc. The process for submitting your idea is to go to the NIIMBL.org/COVID funding website. There's an opportunity to submit my idea at the bottom of the page. That will take you to our submission system. If you've already used that submission system, you might have a username and password already. And if not, you can create one. And if you don't remember your password, of course, you can use the forgot your password option. We'll ask you to fill out the form and submit your document directly into the system. We kicked this off basically after our official notice from NIST last night. We're having this webinar, and the email went out this morning. We're having this webinar now. And for better or worse, we are on an accelerated timeline. The deadline for one-page submissions is Monday at 3 p.m. We apologize. We wish we could give you more time, but this is a case where we're trying to be as responsive as possible and as impactful as possible, as quickly as possible. We expect that after the Monday 3 p.m. deadline, that we'll have a reasonable number of submissions. And given the short timeline, we don't expect to be able to provide feedback to all of the teams. We'll just be reaching out to those submissions that we'd like to carry the conversation forward with, and all the other submissions will unfortunately not be notified of a rejection. We're just going to keep those ideas on hand. In terms of resources, if you have questions in the immediate future, you can email Peggy Thomas at the email address shown on the screen. And again, the website is NIIMBL.org/COVID funding. I think we can move to questions, but I'm going to go back and just leave this email address up and the website up. And you should feel free to chat your question directly to me. And as the questions come in, I'll do my best to answer them. But again, with apologies, this is a relatively short time scale for us, so we may not have good answers to some of the questions. So a first question is, do partner organizations or co-PIs have to be NIIMBL members? Our intent is that they would be NIIMBL members, but the requirement is not a firm one at this point. That's one of those unanswered questions that we need to get some input on, and we will respond something more formally on an FAQ on the webpage. Collaborations are not required, but I hope they're not forbidden. Can we have multi-institutional efforts? Absolutely. And in fact, if I were to say anything about the types of projects and who our community is, we certainly want to encourage collaboration where it makes sense, but we also recognize there's a very short timeline to respond. And so collaborations, you may not have time to establish the kind of collaboration that you'd like to have. How many submissions do we expect to select? We don't have a good idea of that. It could be as few as 2 or 3, or it could be a few more than that. What are the selection criteria? We're going to look at the information we have from NIST about what their intent is, and we're going to do the best we can to evaluate those ideas where we feel within a 12-month period of performance, the organization or the team itself collectively can demonstrate a tangible outcome and impact on COVID-19 response. I'm going to scroll up. What is the timeline after April 8th initial notification? We intend to work with those teams to frame out some additional information that we would need to include as part of a larger package that would go to the federal government. And we are hoping to complete that process within a week after April 8th. That's our intent. Are there restrictions on what can be included in the budget? Yes, there are restrictions in that these projects, like all projects inside NIIMBL, are going to be subject to 2 CFR 200 requirements. So all budget elements need to be allowable and allocable and reasonable to the work to be done. If you have questions about the administrative issues on that, I invite you to drop an email to Peggy Thomas, as shown on the screen, to ask a specific question along those lines. How about access to BSL 3 and 4 facilities? Are they required? Is NIIMBL capable of helping out in this space or connecting to such facilities? NIIMBL doesn't have BSL 3 or 4 facilities to make available for your project team. I think if you have an interest in that space and you aren't aware of any other organizations that have such access, you can drop an email to your project manager, your program manager, sorry, and we can do our best to try to reach out to the community. But again, we're on a very short timeline, so we're hoping that a lot of the capabilities will already be in place for these projects. Are building and construction projects being considered? The answer to that is no. Will NIIMBL link organizations together? We can try to do the best we can, but the reality is there's a relatively short timeline between now and Wednesday, 3 p.m. And we're trying to work out some of the administrative details of how we're going to make this work. You can drop, again, an email to your program manager and we'll do the best we can. Alternatively, this is the second question from a different organization around access to a BSL 3 or 4 facility. If you're on this webinar and you have a BSL 3 facility that might be made available for such a project, we would ask you to email us or email Peggy Thomas at the email that you see on the screen and indicate as such, and we can try to get back to people with that. There's a question about an organization that has been approached by, I think it's Army Research Labs, for a COVID project. Would that project be considered? I think all projects that fit within the budget and other scope and qualifications are a possibility. I would add along these lines that while there is a limited amount of money available currently, if you read the news, you see that there's discussion of a 4th stimulus package. And what we might hope is that as part of the 4th stimulus package, there could potentially be additional resources made available for COVID and pandemic response. There's no guarantees of that, of course. So we do intend to not only take ideas, but hold on to them such that in the event that there were more opportunities in the future, we would have those ideas in hand. I'll extend that and suggest that if you can't respond by 3 p.m. Monday for that deadline, that you take the time over the next few weeks to think about ways that your organization can work individually or collaboratively with others on COVID and pandemic response type activities, and keep that in mind just in case in the future there are opportunities that come up along similar lines. Who will review the proposals? The proposals will be reviewed internally by the NIIMBL staff. Does novel PPE materials against COVID, is that aligned with this call? Yes. How soon can we share the recording of this webinar? We will post it as soon as possible. Part of this, as you may know, if you use Zoom, is that Zoom has to process the recording, and then we'll do some light editing, and then we will post it. So we indicated in the email 24 hours, but we hope and expect that we can get it sooner than that. How much funding is available? We don't have a clear number on that. It's based on a lot of different factors, and ultimately it's in the millions, we believe, but we don't have a clear number to offer. Can we see the NIST criteria? I don't know that there is specific NIST criteria around selection of projects, because the opportunity is in the form of a request for application unique to NIIMBL. So this is more a question of looking from the NIIMBL perspective of where we have the best opportunity to have an outcome on COVID-19 response. How mature should the therapy be in order to be considered? Is drug repurposing considered? In terms of medical countermeasures and therapies, I think the goal is to have an impact in short order. And so the idea that gets proposed should be such that information and data collected would lead to an outcome that would help in COVID response within 12 months of the project period. I would add that if you're proposing work that involves human subjects, all the standard requirements around human subjects activities or separately animal activities would still require, and those administrative steps would still have to follow standard procedures. What's the overall grant dollar volume available? We don't have a specific number to share at this time. Can we elaborate on how directly we expect the efforts to benefit the national response? I don't have a great answer to that other than to say we want to be able to tie the outcomes of selected projects after 12 months in a clear and tangible way to the national response or even regional response. You mentioned NIST. Can we expand on the role of NIST in this initiative? I think, well, NIST would be the sponsor of the activities through a contract through the University of Delaware and NIIMBL out to our community. They would be, we expect it would be in the form of a cooperative agreement. I think if team members have ideas on how to collaborate with the NIST laboratories, that we would welcome that kind of interaction to leverage that capability. What is the total funding available? Again, we don't have that to share. Can a partner site be a non-NIIMBL if the PI at the main site is a NIIMBL member? Our preference for now, without being clear and directive, is that we know if all of the team members are NIIMBL members that this will be acceptable. We still don't have clarity on whether it would be appropriate to have non-NIIMBL members on project teams as co-PIs or key personnel. The exception would be if it is contracted activity as opposed to subcontracted activity, then certainly contracted activities would be reasonable to include. How many projects are we talking about funding? We don't have a clear number. That will of course depend on the number and nature and scale of the project ideas that come in terms of budgets and ideas. We hope to be able to include at least a few. That's our intent, but it will depend on the submissions and the available budgets that come in based on those submissions. Is toxicity of current treatment and approved drugs included or not? It's not out of scope. That would be considered in the scope that we're looking at, but again, that would presumably involve either animal studies or human subject studies, which add some additional administrative steps. And so we'd ask you to be sure that you can accommodate those steps within the budget and the time requested. Is there any MRL level restriction? There is no particular restriction. I would say, as a matter of experience and perspective, that we generally live right in the readiness level 4, 5, 6, 7 space. I think that if the goal is to have an outcome that leads to an impact on national response, that you might want to be thinking about activities that are in that 7 and perhaps 8 space. But that is a very general kind of sense of where things are. I think we'd rather see the ideas come in, try to get a sense for what the impact and the outcomes can be, and then we'll go from there. How detailed of a budget is required? I think we only are requesting a rough order of magnitude budget at this first stage. That is a bottom line number between $100,000 and $750,000 for total costs. Are COVID projects closed to collaborators who are not NIIMBL members? I think already addressed that question. Where can we get a list of NIIMBL organizations? That would be available from our website. Is overhead and indirect costs allowed? Yes, per the standard federal terms and conditions. For academic institutions, for example, one often has a negotiated agreement and would be you'd be using that that rate. Should the proposal be at least readiness 4 in, or can prototyping ideas be considered? I think we're open to all ideas at this stage that are relevant and that meet the other qualifications. Normally, NIIMBL is about manufacturing. Does this include drug development, including animal studies for an existing compound? So this, again, this is an opportunity that is outside of the standard space for NIIMBL. We're not limited to manufacturing of biopharmaceutical products. We're interested in opportunities to solve problems where our expertise as a community creates some value towards solving those problems. So the ideas suggested are in scope, again, with the additional caveats that animal studies, human subject studies, et cetera, have some additional considerations. Is it due Wednesday at 3 p.m.? No, it is due Monday at 3 p.m. So there's a chat that says that Penn State University has BSL-3 facilities. So if you're interested in finding access to a BSL-3 facility, I'll suggest that you contact your program manager, and the NIIMBL team, we can work and see if there is a good point of contact at Penn State who might be willing to field inquiries. Clarification, how detailed of a budget is required for Monday? Just the bottom line number, total costs. Can PI submit multiple proposals? Yes. If the proposal is attractive, but the budget is not, will we consider the project and allow for a revised budget? That's an interesting and a good question. I think we would take that case by case. So the budget should reflect the work that needs to be done and be realistic relative to the work that's being done. We recognize, though, that in one page, you're very limited in what you can discuss as your intended scope of work. And one bottom line number may not break out the costs in a way that we can completely evaluate. So we'll be looking both at budget as well as the content of the planned scope of work and the problem that one is trying to address. And we might come back to a team or a PI and ask for clarification on their budget if we have a question about the ability to do the work for the proposed number. Is the 100 to 750K range direct or total? It's total. Is there a max of 750 to each organization? Asking because if an organization submits multiple ideas, can they be awarded 2 or more? The max is 750 per project, with no specific limitation at this time on the number of projects per organization that might be awarded. There's a specific question on the format for the submission, and that was in the email, and this webinar will be posted. but it's basically a one-page Word document. Are projects such as drug discovery eligible, even though the outcome in 12 months may not be guaranteed? That's a good question. I think drug discovery is considered in scope, but we would be looking in selecting projects for the next step. We would be looking at the likelihood for having a positive impact on COVID response as a part of our internal decision-making process. Can you explain the role of PPE if it's not new PPE development? Expedited manufacture of already approved designs, that is absolutely in scope. It doesn't have to be about inventing something new. It can just be about accelerating something that is already in process, but for which there might be limitations. There's a question about drug discovery again within 1 year. I think I already answered that. Can a company submit a proposal if that company is pending to join NIIMBL? We just need them to be full NIIMBL members by Monday at 3 p.m. That means a fully executed membership agreement. And in some cases, if NIST approval is required, we would need that in place. So it will be difficult if an organization is not yet a NIIMBL member or hasn't initiated that process. Is collaboration with NIST investigators permitted? I think you should include that in the one-pager. In terms of how we will work that out administratively and financially, that's to be determined, but we would encourage that if there is a good synergy there. Will any priority be given to those already working with the federal government on medical countermeasures? I don't think we have a particular sense of priority or not priority based on existing partners, but I could say, I think it's fair to say if an idea is leveraging an activity that's already happening, but there's a new direction to take it, or if funding could accelerate some timelines, then those are the kinds of ideas that also are more likely to lead to an outcome, and therefore we would look at those with some interest. There's a question about indirect costs being included. Yes, and use federal rates, negotiated rates were appropriate. Can a non-NIIMBL member join after April 6th if selected? Again, we're anticipating that the submissions are being led by NIIMBL members. Is drug manufacturing considered? Yes. If one of our team members is at NIST, is there any formal requirements for him? Does he need to contact NIST before Monday? I can't give a good answer for that because I don't work for NIST. I would encourage that person to reach out to Kelly Rogers at NIST, our Federal Technical Program Manager, to do that outreach. But I'll take it one step further and infer we don't expect there to be sponsored research office sign off for those universities that are on the line by Monday. We don't intend for you to have to go through that entire process, although you need to follow your local policies and procedures. Our intent is to try to move quickly to get the ideas in place and then go from there. Developments of adjuvants and vaccine quality included? Yes, that's in scope. Development of technologies to increase RNA yield in COVID patient samples, is that responsive? Yes. University of Maryland, Baltimore has some BSL-3 labs. So again, if you're interested in access to that, we will have our team find a contact at UMB that we can use to share information. Would we entertain proposals with a budget under 100K if the work met the other requirements? Yes, we would. I think as we were putting this together, we didn't imagine that, but I don't think now that we write it and I look at it and we specify 100 to 750K, we might have been better off just specifying no more than 750K. So we will correct that on our end. Are only technical proposals welcome, or are workforce development proposals in support of COVID-19 response welcome? I think we're not limiting it at this point. We're just going to look at what is the potential outcome and impact on COVID-19 response. Will all the slides be posted on the webpage? Yes, we will make these slides available. Is it possible to include, is it possible to include possible but not yet formed collaborations in the project description? Yes, although we will be looking at the ability of the team to get going quickly. And so that's something that you want to be explicit about, the degree to which the team has been working together or is just getting going. Can we repeat the performance period? Is it 1 year and the completion date? So yes, the period of performance is limited to 12 months. And so we'd like to have the projects planned to be done by June 2021. Although if you have scopes of work where deliverables can be created on an even faster timescale, obviously we're very interested in those. Is vaccine stabilization technology without a vaccine candidate in scope? It is in scope. You would want to help justify the linkage to COVID-19 response in that description. I sometimes talk very fast. I've gotten through all the questions that we've gotten on the chat box. And I think my team knows to chat with me if there's any additional questions that they've gotten. So I'll wait for that. Not seeing any. I think we will end a little bit early. Again, we want to thank you for not only participating. We know everyone's very busy right now, but making time to participate in this, we certainly appreciate. We appreciate your willingness to engage in this community and at this time when we can all help in national response. And we'll look forward to working with you and apologize for the short timelines, but this is a national emergency. Of course, it's a global emergency, and we will do our best to move quickly. A couple of last-minute questions. Would funding be awarded to projects for the manufacture of PPE that is potentially that is in scope? There's a question on whether diagnostics are in scope, and that is also in scope. Thank you very much. I think we will close the webinar at this point.
Great.